everybody. It's Tuesday, and I'm Nat, and I'm currently standing at the second floor of the Roberson mansion here at the Roberson Museum and Science Center, and we're doing another tour, you guys. Today we are touring the Mysteries of the Vault, which is a collection of artifacts from over 100 years, from hundreds of years, from the Broome County Historical Society. There's some Broome County Historical Society collections in here, some Roberson collections in here. And by the way, last year, Broome County Historical Society celebrated their 100th anniversary. Woohoo! So, congrats to them. And hello, welcome to the tour. So today we are going to be touring all these, few of the stories of these different artifacts that we have here in our collections, and I'll spin the camera around so we can get a better view. So there's 2 rooms of these collections, these amazing pieces that we have here. So you might be wondering, why are these objects important? Well, each one helps us tell a larger story. Some of them are stories that are very personal to the people who used to live here in Binghamton and Broome County. Some of them are a little bit more mysterious and pose larger questions for us. These items represent hundreds of years of how people lived, survived, and related to one another. They answer questions like how people kept one another close when there weren't photographs in Facebook. And they help us ask questions about what everyday life looked and felt like. And for people who also may have been seen as different, how life may have been like for them. And everyone's questions, what I find so great about history is everyone's questions surrounding history are all different because they relate to the narratives that we want to know about ourselves. They help us answer questions about ourselves, especially, and it helps us build kind of almost our own personal story of what life would have been like for us should we have been born just a little earlier. How we may have had advantages, disadvantages, how we may have been treated differently. So these objects all help us kind of weave that story and help us look inside ourselves and help us tell that story and help us imagine that kind of piece of ourselves, which I think is very fascinating. And I hope you do too. So our first artifact that we're going to get up close and personal with are these 2 painted portraits right here. These are some of the smaller pieces in Broome County Historical Society's collections. And this was before the daguerreotype was invented. Portraits, silhouettes, and hair work, yes, I said hair work, so hair jewelry, were a few of the ways of how people kept each other close before photographs became mainstream. The daguerreotype came about around the mid-1800s. These were painted around 1840, we think, give or take. And these are his and her portraits of Martin and Jane, who lived at 52 Washington Street. So you'll have to look that up on Google Maps and let me know if the house is still there or if it looks different or if it looks similar to what it might have been in the past. But yeah, these are ways that people were able to keep each other close when they didn't have photographs of one another, how to keep a piece of a person with them. Nowadays we have Facebook and everybody's very readily accessible, but back in the day, this is how you kind of kept someone you loved close. Very, very personal memento. In addition to how other people lived, you have a toy horse you can see. I grew up with a rocking horse. I don't know how many other people are doing that nowadays, if that's still a thing. I might be aging myself a little bit. And also over here we have a toy telephone. So much like today where we have objects that replicate adulthood. In the past, they also had that. I know growing up, I had one of the ovens that you used to play with. Yeah, so nothing's changed in that department. Toys that help us prep us for adulthood. But moving on to a different part of an age to the Civil War, actually, we're going to be looking at a very different artifact, getting up close. This little fish, yeah, this is a brooch, and it's a rather curious piece in Roberson's collections. A curator may have been having fun, as the inscription on the back reads that it's made of human bone. I don't think that's true. We have no evidence to corroborate that it is in fact made of human bone. There hasn't been any testing done on it either, but what we do have are similar stories of similarly made jewelry made during the Civil War by prisoners, specifically prisoners of war of the Civil War. And the bones were typically made out of the remains of pigs and bovines that were fed, pigs and bovine bones, that were given to prisoners to feast upon. While in these prisons, this specific person, a Mr. Clark, that's the only name that we have to identify the person who made this, was apparently a prisoner of war at Libby Prison, which was one of the more infamous prisons of the South, the North. Actually, we have a northern twin, a northern equivalent of a very harsh Union prison up here in the southern tier in Elmira that was nicknamed Hellmira by its occupants because it was known for its harsh conditions. So while prisoners of war were kept in these prisons to kind of have a bit of relief, a bit of escape from the horrors and the uncertainty surrounding them, whether they were going to be released or whether they were going to die of starvation or rampant illness that was running through a lot of these prisons, they were able to carve these intricate pieces as a way to escape, for a moment. But moving on to a slightly happier piece that we have in our collection, slightly happier, is this beautiful embroidery. This beautiful embroidery, look at that detail. I'm gonna get really up close here. Yeah, so this is a embroidery of, you can see down here, the Binghamton State Hospital, also known as the Binghamton Insane Asylum. And this is Broadmoor Hall, where the artist Joseph Roth, who made this, was a resident. He was a resident and typically did embroideries. We know of about 20 of these embroideries. He did one of the Brooklyn Bridge and the East River. He often did them of places where he was institutionalized, where he was staying. Joseph Roth, we believe, had schizophrenia. And these embroideries, why this embroidery is so important is it represents one of the more humane ways that patients in these institutions were treated at the time. So typically there were different therapies that were given to these patients, like electroshock, lobotomies, very cruel. But embroideries are one of the ways that a lot of the patients in these institutions were able to, they believe that embroideries and art helped calm the patients, helped them feel a sense of accomplishment. I know that art therapy helps me, and there is some backing behind art therapy helping us meditate. Zentangle is a very popular form, but this represents a more humane way that people were treated back in with mental illnesses, which I think is pretty interesting. But the larger story behind these artifacts here that we have in this exhibition are ones that help us create markers, points of reference in our timelines, and all of the objects that I've described are all important to understanding cultural tipping points, to understand technological tipping points, how our society continues to evolve, grow, and change through how we live, how we work, how we play, and how we treat one another, probably more importantly. These artifacts help tell those stories. These objects contain multitudes. But if you want to I highly recommend. If you want to find out more and actually explore more artifacts and their stories of Broome County, Mysteries from the Vault, which is by the Broome County Historical Society. Really wonderfully researched, fascinating objects inside that all kind of help us weave a better fabric of Broome County, of history in general in America as well. But another item that I also recommend you picking up if you want to read more about the general ebb and flow of culture and advancements, and really getting a sense of how people thought and lived and moved and worked, lived and died, and general philosophies and ideals, and the things that kind of helped shift and change those ideals. This book, Victorian America, Transformations in Everyday Life. There's actually a different book for each era. So colonial America, things like that. I believe you can only get this book used, but it's a really great resource if you're looking for kind of that overview of how life shifts and change and the ebbs and flows of everyday life, which is very fascinating and helps us tell our own story, which I think is really great. But anyway, that concludes our Tuesday tour. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments down below. I'm happy to answer any. Next week, I believe we are going to be discussing a little bit of a local debate, Roberson versus Roberson, which I think is a very interesting linguistic and cultural shift. And there's interesting oral histories and rumors and things that even staff today is kind of debates and questions. What did the Robersons or Robersons call themselves? What did Alonzo and Margaret call themselves? Yeah, Roberson or Roberson. But anyway, that concludes our tour for today. I hope you stay safe as New York slowly phases open and Broome County is in our first phase of opening. And I hope to see you guys back at the museum, hopefully soon, maybe July. But yeah, stay safe, guys. Bye.